I want to know, and I've been asking this question for a decade, when will there be an audit of BDC, Park Heights Renaissance, the PCDA, and all the money that's been coming to Park Heights over the last few years? Surely, in 2010, when the slots bill was implemented, from 2007, Senate Bill 3, Park Heights got money from every slot parlor in the state. To this day, from MGM, from Live, and from Horseshoe. When are we going to have an accounting of those funds, and how are you going to do that, and how can that be done now? Like, I know Mayor Dixon is running for election, but Councilman Costello, you're in office now. What will you do now
phone call and try and find you shelter for this evening, ma'am.
I need action. I don't want phone call.
As well as the person that I go to on homeless issue is Christina Flowers. I just went to her today for a young lady.
Okay, all right.
So I'm gonna take the mic. I'll be real quick, and this is kind of like a piggyback from Monday night's town hall. One of my biggest concerns involving juvenile crime and the town hall itself was that our schools were not present for the town hall. I heard a delegate say that, by the time we get the juveniles at 13, 14, 15, and I made it very clear that that is too late to reach these young people. So what I've been finding are the holes since I've been dragged into this whole world that I don't want to be in.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
Crystal Gonzalez. My daughter, Aaliyah Gonzalez, was shot and killed in this Brooklyn shooting. So some of the holes that I'm finding is the lack of education in the schools. And Sheila Dixon, you spoke about starting at home. It absolutely starts at home. But within the schools, we know that that is the first point of contact that these kids can have behavioral issues picked up on, right? At a very young age, you can see some of the display very early on. So then when we have these processes in place, the schools can then notify people who need to be notified, can do workshops with parents at home to figure out how we can bridge the gap into, before it even gets to 13, 14, 15, well, now we're talking about juvenile crime, right? Because it needs to start far earlier, and it needs to be something that we're all coming together with, because this can't continue. I've said, when you are elected back to mayor, I'll say that, will you introduce education in the form of assembly presentation or something to these young kids when it comes to gun violence and drug use? That used to be very prevalent in school when I was coming up. These kids don't have that. All they have is social media, and they're being raised by video games and social media.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with you. I think about your daughter all the time because she was friends with my church member, sister daughter who's at college, and I talk to people every day about we have to make a difference. So my prayers and thoughts are with you, and I agree, it's got to start earlier. And as a former teacher, you can identify it early as well. I did early childhood, and that's where we really got to begin that process. So, and I go back to the community school concept, because where there's that breakdown. But one thing in the African American community in particular, because children face trauma now that they haven't faced before, and so that mental health service has to start early on. And in our community in particular, it cannot be taboo because you need to see a therapist, because that therapist is going to help. And that's one of the things that I worked in my prior life. It was called family strengthening, where we were in the communities with therapists, working with families, helping them. And so I definitely hear what you're saying and agree.
I don't understand with all that's going on, how come it's not there? I mean, this is shooting every day. There are multiple shootings every day. Every day, 2-year-old shot.
Yeah.
You have a young boy, 18-year-old male coming from Pennsylvania, deciding he doesn't want to buy your car. And just like my daughter, a visitor here, lost his life.
Yes.
And we don't have any of that in place.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one more question. Just state your name, please.
Jen Covino. I'm a resident of Federal Hill, live on Montgomery Street, first walk in from the Inner Harbor. Just appreciate all your time tonight. Councilmember Costello, I know we've met previously to discuss a lot of the work that's needed to be done here. Brad, thank you for all you're doing in our community. And Mayor, always grateful to anyone who's willing to step up and run for office these days. Unfortunately, I think sometimes politics gets in the way of making meaningful action now. And as you've heard from family members of those who have lost their lives to gun violence, we can't wait another day to do anything here in the city of Baltimore. My family, was subject to 2 incidents about a month and a half, 2 months ago. Had a brick come flying through my window when I was holding my 3-month-old son. 90-minute response from the Baltimore Police Department. A week later, a hospitality worker was held up outside of my front window at gunpoint at 3 in the afternoon. Later on that night, 3 teenagers came back looking for the evidence they discarded, running away from police. No police returned when the suspects came back to my house. I had them on Ring camera talking about what they had done earlier in the afternoon. When we're looking at a redevelopment of Harbor Place and building capacity for thousands of new housing units and new residents to come in, how can you expect residents to support increased capacity when we are not receiving any public safety services now? I have a half dozen neighbors who live on my street who have been physically assaulted over the past 18 months, and 2/3 of those assaults have occurred in broad daylight. So what I'm interested in learning is, what are you going to do tomorrow, not a year and a half from now, not January of 2025 after election outcomes, but what will you do today working with the current mayor, working with the leadership of the Baltimore Police Department to ensure that acts of violence are not occurring to residents on a daily basis now? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Councilman Costello.
Appreciate the question. We've been in touch. We had a stoop gathering at your home, probably impromptu, 75 different neighbors, and we spent about 2 hours talking. I spent an inordinate amount of my time dealing with public safety issues. I'm grateful that I have community leaders in the district like Brad and Jeff that are so engaged, and we have community leaders like that all across the district, whether it's South Baltimore, downtown, Midtown, Central West Baltimore, and oftentimes we get pulled into issues that are outside of the scope of what we deal with on the city council on a daily basis, and oftentimes have to fill in the blanks because things didn't happen. For example, someone gets robbed and BPD doesn't bother to check with the person who called 911 who has camera footage. BPD doesn't bother to check with the bank across the street that has camera footage. So a lot of what I do on a daily basis is try to plug those holes and fill in those blanks despite not being in law enforcement. I'm willing to work with the current mayor. I work very closely with the deputy mayor for public safety and with the majors in each of the 3 police districts that cover the district I represent, the southern, the central, and the western. I'm going to continue to do that, continue to have conversations in the community, and anyone who has any ideas on how we can improve things and make the community safer, I am all ears. My door is open, my phone is on, please let me know.
Who should be responsible for the officers not going to these neighborhoods and following up on some of these crimes? Is that the commissioner's responsibility to make sure officers are doing their due diligence?
The unfortunate reality is we have a shortage of 600 officers. I had a constituent a month ago who had his door kicked in. Walked over to his house, this was on a Sunday afternoon, waiting for detectives to show up. By the time I got there, this was shortly after 3 p.m., those officers in the Southern District had 16 calls in 45 minutes before starting their shift that was on their backlog. So you have officers running all around the city, responding to service calls, and we have an expectation in the community, everyone in this room wants officers to engage in the community and to talk with people. I'm not sure practically how that's possible when we have officers having to respond to 16 calls for service at the very beginning of our shift. We have got to do more to aggressively recruit officers, and we have got to do more to aggressively retain officers if we want to see that tide change.
Ms. Dixon, this is the last question before we'll wrap it up tonight, but if elected, how would you plan to recruit and attain and retain officers?
So, first of all, I'm going to go in and speak with the current officers. The officer on the street, the sergeants, lieutenants on up, and get their input. Secondly, We're going to go out and recruit aggressively like we did before. We had to go to Puerto Rico to recruit. Third, I'm going to talk to officers who are retired but maybe want to come back and balance that. We're going to bring the school police because they go through the same training, the sheriff's department. We have to also work with the universities. We have University of Maryland has police, Hopkins has police, MBA has police. So the question is, when there are issues that happen in an area, it might be near a bus stop or a subway stop, why not have the Maryland Department of Transportation respond versus they show up and then the police have to handle it? Because and we all have to sit at the table and do it together. Schools are about to close for holiday. They come back in January. Okay, well, let's talk to those school police about being out here while kids are out of school to help in those areas. Because communities are doing everything in their power, particularly in certain areas, you know, with the cameras, et cetera. So we have to make sure we provide that support.
There's a lot of work to be done here. Panelists, thank you so much, Jeff and everybody. Jeff, Brad, Councilman Costello, former Mayor Sheila Dixon. Thank you for everyone for asking questions, and for our viewers at home, thank you for watching us. We will continue to make sure that we're holding our elected leaders accountable, and have a great evening.
Go Sheila!